So hey everyone, in this video we are taking a look at the Tank3 microphone by FIFINE. This is a dynamic microphone with a solid build. We also have the FIFINE BM88 mic arm stand, which I'm using at the moment. FIFINE sent me both these items for review in this video. Now I'll be comparing the microphone to the SM7B, the Stellar X2 condenser. We have a previous FIFINE microphone, the K688, I'll be comparing it to. And we also have the RE20 by Electro Voice. Now to make this review a little more interesting, I'm actually going to measure the frequency responses of these microphones using a calibrated microphone. And I'll be showing those results later in the video. At the end of the video, I'll also be sharing the source code for everyone out there. So if you want to measure your own microphones, I'll walk you through how I did it so you can do it on the cheap as well. So let's get started. We'll do unboxing first and go from there. Doing a quick unboxing, we have a manual. We have a 6-foot USB cable, Type A and USB-C. And we have the microphone. And it has a good feel to it, has a metal solid feeling to it, and very nice. That's one of the first things I noticed, is how smooth it turned. This is a knob that lets you loosen it, but if you crank down on it, it still has play. So you can't lock it, but you can get it pretty stiff. On the back we have USB-C, headphone, and XLR. I'll be looking mainly at the XLR in this, but we'll also take a quick look at the USB-C. There's a grill, and that's about it. Now let's compare it to the SM7B, because that's kind of like my go-to. It's a little bit smaller than the SM7B. It's lighter than the SM7B, but it still feels girthy, if you know what I mean. It still feels like it has some weight to it. Now if we look at the SM7B, we have ways to adjust frequency response. We can either add a little bit of brightness on the upper end, or we can roll off the bass. I'm going to be testing it flat, and that's how I usually run this mic. Now with the SM7B, we have on the stand mount this part here that makes it easy to screw onto a stand, so you don't have to twist the microphone kind of in circles to put it on. You can just tighten it that way. With the FIFINE Tank3, there's no way to control that. We look at the XLR port, goes in nice, stays snug, pulls out easy. So the tolerances are pretty good there. You'll notice that the XLR comes out the end of the microphone, which is common. With the SM7B, it kind of uniquely has the XLR in parallel with the stand, which will take me to the next thing I wanted to talk about, is this guy. I was sent a boom arm as well from FIFINE to include in this review, so I'm going to touch on it as well, and I'll be using the microphone with the stand during my testing. Okay, so what we can see, that the microphone has a cable, goes in the back, inside, and we can put this little case on. There's an arrow. I don't know what that arrow actually means, whether to open or close, but let's assume it means close. We get it in, and we slide it forward. Okay, the arrow does mean lock. Now it came with an Allen key. It also came with a little instruction guide in a cardboard box. And as we can see, that we can then finish routing the rest of the cable through the other part. We can see the Allen keys go in here, and this part disconnects. Right, it's nothing special, it's just friction fit. We put the Allen key on and we can lock it. And now that's not really moving. There's a little bit of give, so you can still adjust it as you need to, but depending on how much you torque that down, we're going to get that locked. Just a quick note, although the microphone itself doesn't have an easy way to unscrew, if you use the boom arm and you just loosen the ball joint here, it has a little gripped part, lets you rotate the ball joint, and you can easily connect or disconnect the microphone. The other joints, however, such as this one here, also require the Allen key. Okay, so you can tighten or loosen these joints with the Allen key. It came stiff but not locked. It makes it easy to adjust the microphone while using it. Now, when we look at the microphone here, depending on how you have it set up, it could look a little bit silly. I'm not going to say silly, but the XLR comes out the back and it loops around, so that does take up a little more space. Again, with the SM7B, you don't really have that problem. The XLR cable comes right out the back. Now, beyond the stand mount and the XLR output differences of these two microphones, there's some other variations that I like and I don't like about the Shure SM7B in comparison. The Shure SM7B does have a removable windscreen, which is nice because you can put on other ones and replace it easily when it gets worn out. So here's another SM7B windscreen. You can see that this one's almost 10 years old, but it's degrading at this point. This one's starting to rip a bit as well. So you can replace them as they degrade without damage. You can also put on a larger, thicker one. With the Tank3, you don't have the option to easily replace the windscreen. You can, however, buy some foam windscreens like this one here, and it will fit over the FIFINE. So if you do have problems with plosives and wind noise, you can perhaps buy the Shure SM7B larger foam, and it will fit. This other one, though, is too small to fit, unfortunately. So that's one difference. Now, I do get a lot of cat hair having a cat on the foam, and it's hard to clean. So if you have a cat, the exterior of the SM7B with the foam is a little bit annoying. With the Tank3, you don't have that problem. The cat hair doesn't really stick to it. You can also look at the RE20. That also has internal foam, and it has a sound signature very similar to the SM7B. Now, I want to compare the FIFINE Tank3 to the FIFINE K688. Now, this is a microphone I already reviewed, and they did send this to me as well for the review back then. But it's a very similar microphone, I feel, to the Tank3. We have USB-C output, headphone jack, the gain ports as well, XLR. The windscreen is removable, and it also fits the windscreen from the SM7B. I won't go too much into it, but it's a good microphone, I think, for the price. It has a shock mount, which is something the Tank3 does not have. The Tank3 has this very smooth feeling arm, however. There's a mute button here that's physical. On the FIFINE K688, there's a touch sensitive button. I tend to prefer the actual physical button to the touch. It's easier to find. But there might be arguments of how this sounds better. You don't want to hear a large click when you mute. Otherwise, the main differences I feel are the build quality. The Tank 3 is quite significantly heavier than the K688. This feels like it's made of relatively thin metal. And you can kind of, it sounds like tin just by tapping on it. So the build quality, it's still mostly metal, but not the best sound. Where the Tank 3, it sounds like you're tapping on a rock. Functionality-wise, these mics are very similar. It comes down on this front to whether you want a heavy-duty build, or do you want something that looks a little more like the SM7B. Now to test these microphones, I'll be using a calibration mic. This is not a scientifically accurate one. It is designed for calibrating rooms and such, I believe. It's reasonably accurate. There's the response curve. It comes with a calibration file to compensate for that. And so using that reference calibration mic, I finished now measuring the response curves for all the microphones I'll be looking at here. Now while I go through these graphs explaining them, giving my opinion on them, I'm going to be switching between the SM7B and the Tank 3. And I'll just be alternating back and forth between them so you can hear how it sounds in a natural situation. They're an inch apart. They're about 7 inches from my mouth. And so this is how I generally use my microphones. And you can just judge for yourself how it sounds. Up front, we have the two microphones in question. On the left is the response curve for the Tank 3, and on the right we have the SM7B, and it's a legitimate SM7B, not a clone. And the interesting thing about these frequency charts is it will aid you in listening for the differences. Sometimes if someone points out a difference, it's easier to identify. So I'm hoping that as you listen to the Tank 3 versus the SM7B, you'll hear what we're seeing. On the Tank 3, what we're seeing right here, at around 200 hertz, we start to see the frequency response drop off. So we're not picking up a whole lot of that low end. The 50, 100 hertz low end is lacking. The human ear does hear those frequencies, and it adds to the warmth of the sound, in my opinion. The SM7B, on the other hand, it does drop off a little bit as well, around 200 hertz. And this is a logarithmic graph, by the way. It does drop off a little bit, but it doesn't drop off as much. It's much flatter relative to the Tank 3. I can't say my calibration mic is 100% accurate. It could be off by 3 decibels here and there. But this looks very familiar to me as an SM7B response curve. So I'm assuming we're doing pretty good here. Now let's switch out to the RE20 to compare with. The RE20 looks very similar again to the SM7B in terms of a flat frequency response. It's a little more dynamic in the higher end, and there's a little bit of a hump around 200 on the low end. But again, relative to the Tank 3, it has a deep warmth sound. I have a hard time telling the difference between the RE20 and the SM7B. Now let's look at something like the K688. This is the other FIFINE microphone that I was sent by FIFINE a little while ago for review. It's relatively flat. In fact, it's really flat from 200 all the way up to 10,000. But again, very familiar to the Tank 3. We're seeing the frequency response drop down at around 200 hertz. So we're losing the low end. This is what I noticed when I reviewed the K688. It didn't have as much warmth as the SM7B. One more microphone directly compared, and that is the X2. This is a condenser mic, a large diaphragm condenser. Yeah, this X2 is a very flat microphone, and we're seeing a flat response here, so great stuff. SM7B versus the Tank3. Now, this is an example of how you don't need a calibration microphone. We can use a reference microphone and compare relatively to it. So this is the difference between a Tank3 and an SM7B. This is not the frequency response curve, it's the relative response curve. And so what we're seeing is, again, yes, we're not getting as much low end from the Tank3 as we do with the SM7B. We lose almost 10 decibels between negative, almost 10 decibels of gain. Maybe even more, maybe upwards of 15. So on the low end, we're not getting as much warmth. K688 versus the Tank3. This is a little more fun. These microphones look very, very similar, and I'm not seeing a whole lot of dramatic difference. So just to make my life easy, I'm going to handhold the microphones while I do a comparison. I'm currently speaking into the RE20. Again, I'm about 5-6 inches away from the microphone. It's off axis. I'm not speaking directly into them. The Tank3 is on my right, whatever that is on the screen there, and the RE20 is on my left. So this is the RE20, and the Tank3 is on the right. Now I'm hand holding the K688 on the left, and on the right I have the Tank3. Again, I'm speaking off axis, about 5-6 inches away. So this is the K688 versus the Tank3. So we're now looking at the X2, the Stellar X2. I had to turn down the gain a lot for this microphone. It's very loud relative to the dynamics. It is a large diaphragm condenser. It does require phantom power. It has a relatively flat frequency response, so it's quite a nice microphone on that front. And it's a pretty good price considering. So this is the Stellar X2 compared to the Tank3. They're both the same distance apart from my mouth. I do have a windscreen on the X2 just to help with plosives, because otherwise it might be a little extra sensitive to them. Now, I prefer XLR output on my microphone. I'm a bit of a snob on that front. But with the Tank3, you have your option of XLR, USB-C, and both, apparently. So at the moment, I'm recording both USB-C output and XLR at the same time. It's letting me do it, so might as well give it a go. The microphone has a headphone gain, mic gain, mute, headphone port. All that functionality is only available in the USB-C mode. Okay, when you connect it to your computer, my Windows computer, it was detected automatically, showed up as a FIFINE mic device, 16-bit, 2-channel, 48 kilohertz. Now my final thoughts on the Tank3 microphone and the BM88 mic arm stand, both sent to me for review. As for the Tank3, it lives up to its name. It is a much more rugged microphone with better build quality compared to the previous FIFINE K688 I reviewed. That had thinner metals. It had something that you could hear inside kind of shaking around when you tapped on it. The Tank3 feels more like a rock, more like a quality microphone should. I like that. That is great. The sound quality hasn't changed relative to the K688 though. Now, the K688 still sounds good for a sub-$100 microphone, but it doesn't sound as good as like an RE20 or the Shure SM7B. Those microphones cost a lot more, and they require a preamp, XLR cables. They're harder to gain in some cases, so they're not for everyone. The Tank3, despite losing out on the low end, you could probably EQ that up, bring it up in software to make it a little bit warmer. If FIFINE included drivers that offered that option, maybe a switch on the microphone to give you a boost in the warmth to get a little more neutral. Maybe some software like what Shure offers with the MB7. Those features could add a lot more value to this microphone, and really it'd be harder not to recommend in that case. As for the boom arm, I found it to feel like high quality. It feels strong. There's a little bit of wiggle with the microphone stand if I go vertically with it. Still, that's not a big deal. I haven't had a microphone stand like this tubular design. I've a long time ago had a spring boom arm. It constantly fell down because it couldn't support the weight of my microphone. This boom arm supports the weight of my Shure SM7B without issue. It has good cable management. I like that. It looks nice. I like that. It's compact. And the price is great. I'll bring that up here. The price for this boom arm is $60 US, $59.99, and apparently it comes in white and black. The biggest complaint, and this is not a complaint with the arm itself, is that if you tap on a desk that it's connected to, it does transfer the sound to your microphone. There's no sort of shocking system built into the arm. I wouldn't expect there to be. But with the Tank 3 doesn't have any sort of shock mechanism, it looks like, either. So all the sound gets transferred from the desk into the microphone. Now, if you have another microphone that has a shocking mechanism built in, that may not be an issue. Now, while working on this video, I felt like I needed to include a low-cost option. I thought maybe the MB7 by Shure, but that's still too expensive. I have an SM57, but it's not quite broadcast style. So I went to AliExpress to look for some really cheap microphones to compare against, something lower cost than the Tank 3. And what I noticed is that there's a lot of FIFINE microphones on AliExpress. They have really good reviews, and there's lower cost FIFINE alternatives as well. Now, I wanted something that was not FIFINE, so I found a company called FDUCE. And this S40 has a XLR and USB variant. I went with the XLR only version to save money, so $35 US. It shipped in time for this review, so I'm going to include it here. Now I have it out, I'm speaking into it right now, but I'm also switching between it and the Tank 3, so you can hear the difference as I speak. Now, I didn't include the FDUCE in the earlier frequency response tests, so I thought maybe it'd be a good opportunity to compare the FDUCE to the Tank 3 by comparing them relatively using the software I wrote for this experiment. What we can do is we can jump into a site I have called, the link will be in the description, but it's a pink noise generator. It plays full spectrum pink noise. So what we're going to do is I'm going to grab a desktop speaker that has enough bass. I'm going to hold it about a foot away from the microphones, and then using my phone here, I'm just going to play the pink noise for 8 seconds. And using Audacity, let's switch to Audacity, I'm going to record the output, okay? So after recording the pink noise with our microphones, we can just take a subsection of the audio. We need maybe like 5-8 seconds at most. We'll trim it down. We'll then split it into 2 individual mono tracks. The top track here is the Tank 3, so we'll export that. Current selection only, Tank 3. And then we'll do the same with the FDUCE. Export audio, current selection only, FDUCE. Okay, sweet. So we have the 2 audio files now saved as WAV files. We can go to our script now, which is here in the cloud. The links are in the description. This is a Google Colab document that I wrote. It's like a Python script hosted in the cloud. It's free to use. You need a Google account, I think, to sign in to use it, but it's free. We don't have to install anything locally. We just have to follow the steps one by one. Now, I did write this with the help of some ChatGPT, but I wrote it for this test, this review. Okay, so we hit play. The first chunk that installs our dependencies. It can take up to 30 seconds. The next step is we select our audio file. I want to compare the Tank3 to the FDUCE to see how the Tank3 sounds. So I'm going to select the FDUCE as our reference mic. Next, we're going to select the Tank3. Once it uploads, we'll go to the next step, trimming the two audio files. This next step here is a calibration step. This is if you have a calibrated mic. They come sometimes with a calibration file. You can upload that calibration file here, but we don't have one in this case since we're just doing a relative test. The last test is to run the graphing component. So this generates our frequency differences and smooths it and then graphs it. And so this is the result. This is the first time I'm actually seeing these results. It looks like around 250 hertz and under. The Tank3 has less bass, so it's not going to be as warm sounding as the FDUCE is. You could probably judge that for yourself. But it does have a louder midsection. So around 250 to around 1500, it seems to be louder. That might be good or bad depending on which voice you have. If you need more clarity, this could help quite a bit, but it might also increase a little bit of that nasal sound that comes out around 1,000 or 2,000 or so. On the high end, I don't know what to make of that. Again, this is not an absolute frequency response of either microphone. This is the relative comparison. So how one microphone sounds relative to the other. And you can do this test at home. Doesn't take much. Now the FDUCE is just an example of one of many microphones I could have bought for under $100 on AliExpress. There's so many microphones that sound good, that have good build quality these days. It's hard for me to make a recommendation. It really comes down to what you're looking for with sound quality, features, style, looks. The Tank3 by FIFINE definitely has good build quality. It has a biodynamics sort of aesthetic to it. It has a pretty good sound, and it's under $100, so it's a fair pick. And that's it. Thank you, FIFINE, for sending me these items for review, and thank you for watching. I appreciate it, guys. I know it was a long video. Hit me up in the comments with what microphone you think was the best sounding. I am legitimately interested to know. And otherwise, take care.